thank you very much for being here. Now, if you were in the earlier session, you will have known that we were talking about that phrase net zero, whether it's helpful to have targets, what we mean. We were talking a bit about calculating carbon usage, tier 3, all that stuff. So we delved in quite quickly. And now we're coming out again, and we're going to focus in this session in terms of that whole world of carbon counting and that whole world of offsetting. And I'm joined by Jeremy Jones, who's Chief Technology Officer for BlociCarbon. I'm joined by Nick Miller, Director of Miller Research, and Mark Powney, MD at Business News Wales and Green Economy Wales. Let's give them a round of applause to make them feel loved.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you. And I'm going to start with Mark, because obviously, you know, you talk to a wide group of businesses. While I sit down, perhaps you'll tell us how much you think businesses in Wales are kind of thinking about decarbonising and actually doing it.
Yeah, no, thank you. I think ultimately everyone's looking at it. We'd be silly not to. I think everyone's passionate about it. There's ethical reasons why everybody should be trying to do something. I don't think that's under question at all. However, I think there's a big inconsistency. I think there are some industries where it's very relevant. So tourism, for example, if you're not thinking this way, then you're in trouble. Your customers are expecting you to be doing this. On the flip side, you have the manufacturing sector who are driven by energy costs, and they've got a lot of challenges economically coming up, and the environment isn't a priority, unfortunately. It's not. And then you've got everybody else, and we're an example. I've got 20 things on my desk, and measuring my carbon footprint isn't a priority.
Yeah, and also we were discussing earlier about whether there are some people are hoping to think, oh well, we won't change, and there'll be the status quo. There ain't no status quo in this world, is there?
No, I think everyone's got to go into it with an open mind, and they've got to do their best. And the advice that I would give any businesses that have yet to look at this process is make sure it's good for business. That's the first. You have to put that as first priority. Otherwise,
and of course, when we talk about is it good for business, there's the bottom line, but there's also brand, isn't there, and customers.
There is, yeah. Customers will expect businesses to be doing it, and customers are not always retail customers. If you look at the procurement processes and how those procurement processes are changing now very quickly, if you're not taking those boxes with some of those big procurement companies, you're not going to win those contracts.
Now, of course, if you're decarbonising, you've got to prove that you're decarbonising, and that enters the whole world of counting and offsetting. Now, offsetting's had quite a sort of toxic name to it, hasn't it? Because you say that to some people and they think, oh, taking farmland and sticking the wrong trees on it. It's much more than that, isn't it? Nick Miller, you've developed a way of counting and trying to use it for good. Tell us more.
Yes, so I run Miller Research. We're a public policy consultancy in Wales, and we do a lot of work on decarbonisation and mitigation, adaptation, particularly in the context of the 2030 net zero target. And we're also very involved increasingly with just transition, because we see one of the challenges of decarbonisation is the social impact that it has on the population as a whole. And we've worked with a lot of community organisations who are providing social impact and saving carbon as a byproduct. So, for example, Fair Share Cymru, who take food out of food waste, Green Stream Flooring, who recycle these carpet tiles and save a huge amount of carbon there. And so what we've done is we've worked with those bodies, and we've developed bespoke carbon audit models by which we can surface that carbon, we can monetize it, and we're working with Jeremy on that, and then we can sell that as social impact carbon offsets to people who want them. And there's a number of advantages there. I mean, we're all, I think, quite aware of some of the stories we've seen, particularly in The Guardian, about offsetting schemes in faraway countries where we can't see what's happening, and those things not really being trustworthy. So we feel that we're providing real-time UK-based social impact offsets, and we feel it's a really exciting product. But we do face some challenges, and I'm sure we'll come on to that.
And do you think that companies like the fact they can say to their shareholders, look, we're helping in this way, and you can see it?
Yeah, well, that's kind of where the challenge comes in, because I think at senior level, yes, definitely. But then when it comes down to the practicalities of accreditation, proving what you're doing and satisfying the accountants, it gets to be a very different story. And I think that's where our big challenge lies.
Now, Jeremy, if you look on your website, you talk about calculating carbon and offsetting carbon based in the farm. So you can immediately think, oh my God, this is trees on decent farmland. It's far from that, isn't it? Can you explain in a simple way to us what it is you're doing and why that's different?
Okay, yeah. Well, we started off as a blockchain company, so we're kind of accidental environmentalists. So we came along from this from a technology point, which is why we're here this week. But what we realised once we'd got the blockchain in place to measure and track carbon offsets, that we had a problem at the beginning, which was the provenance of the original carbon at the start. And so that's what we kind of applied ourselves to and said, well, how can we check that the carbon at the start is as good as it can be? Because that's the issue. When you talk about offsets, people not liking offsets, it's not because they don't like offsets, it's that they don't trust them. So we need to put trust back into the system. And so we first looked at, the third world offsets that, there are plenty around, but not very well verified or validated. And so we thought, well, let's look at home. Wales is a green and pleasant land. If we can't offset carbon in Wales, where can we do it? So we spoke to some local farmers and one guy who was very involved in regenerative farming, regenerative agriculture. And the statistic that hit us was that a 0.1% of soil organic carbon is equivalent of carbon sequestered of 9.8 tonnes per hectare. 9.8 tonnes per hectare. Compare that to 32 kilos for a mature tree. So you've got to plant a lot of trees in order to get the same CO2 sequestered from improving your soil. Now, improving your soil is a good thing. It's a good thing for the farm, it's a good thing for your animals, obviously it's a good thing for the planet. So what we're trying to do then is to look at how can we measure that carbon on the farm by improving soil health, increasing regenerative farming, and then adding that to the blockchain. So that the other end of the scale, businesses in Wales that want to offset can do it, knowing full well where that's come from. They can go to the farm and visit and understand what they're doing. We had a National Farming Day open day. Lots of people came along to that, and even I was quite amazed in terms of how small changes in farming practice can actually offset a lot of carbon. And you've got this beautiful circle, which is that in Wales we can offset the carbon for our Welsh businesses. So we solve two problems. We help the farmers, and they need help at the moment, and we help businesses achieve net zero by 2030. So yeah, that's what we're doing.
How do you persuade people that it matters the quality of our soil? Because to get that buy-in, people have got to get it.
Yeah, and it's really difficult. I mean, this whole persuasion is very difficult. People, they think, we go to business and they say, well, just plant some trees. We'll just plant. And you think, well, what's the benefit that you're going to achieve by planting some trees? They're not going to produce any carbon offset in the first 5 years. By the time you've grown them in the nursery and you've transported them to site and you've put a bamboo stake in which has come on a ship from China, and you've done all the things that need to be done to get those trees growing, you're actually helping anybody, let alone yourselves. So what we want to engage with our clients, explain to them what we're doing, look at what we're doing, and use tech as well. I mean, I think there's an issue that we got into this mess because of tech, because of the Industrial Revolution and everything. But my view is we don't put the brake on. We put our foot on the accelerator. We use tech to help get us out of this. And one of the things we're using is satellite tracking, so that we can verify the carbon in the ground without having to get in with our wellies on and a spade and measure it that way.
So you can prove to people the increase in the carbon in the soil, can't you? Because we can analyse that kind of thing. Yeah. Nick Miller, in terms of what you're talking about, how do, for instance, Fair Share Cymru show how much carbon they've been involved with? And how can you quantify it in the social area as well as soil?
Yeah, we can. So we've got some clever guys, not me, I hasten to add, who can put together open sourced audit models, which are very bespoke. And that's one of the challenges. We have to put together quite narrow models. So we've put together a model for food waste aversion. We've got one for Repair Cafe Wales. We've got one for Benthyg, the Library of Things. And we're doing some stuff with pallet recycling, bike hire schemes, and each one requires a separate model. And to accredit those through the normal accreditation bodies would just be really, really expensive and quite prohibitive to a lot of community groups. And so we face two big challenges. First one is accreditation, and that's really dominated by a small number of global players. And despite the fact that at least one of those two global players has been quite widely discredited, they're still the easy option because they have the brand name, they've got the market dominance, they've got that position. And the other one is value and kind of how we set the price for carbon. So those two things have been a real challenge for us. And so the idea that we can use blockchain is really, really appealing to us because we can use that to help verify the process. We have open source models. People can see those effects when they look out the window, which is really important. And we know that whatever carbon you're saving, you're also generating additional social impact. So there's a leverage involved, which is really, really important to us. So, for example, we can create kind of circular models whereby, for example, we work with Beryl, the bike hire scheme. If they bid for a local authority contract to run a scheme, they include Exhibit C as part of their bid and say, we'll carbon footprint the carbon savings you achieve through the bike hire scheme. Now, that carbon can then be bought back by the local authority as part of its commitment to 2030. The money goes to Beryl, and they spend it on giving free cycle hire to people who wouldn't normally be able to afford it. So there's a massive kind of social leverage as well as the carbon impact. So we think there's huge scope in this space, but we need to get this accreditation sorted. And what I'm hoping is that to take the blockchain analogy a step further, what we'd really like to do is to adopt a proof of stake approach as opposed to the current kind of proof of work accreditation certification approach. And that's something we're looking at the moment and trying to work on.
Okay, can I de-jargonise that a moment? Can you explain what proof of state approach means? Either of you. You could do it if you like. Come on, what's proof of state? Steve, you can tell us.
Well, not in this audience, because you guys will all know much more than I do. My understanding is that in the crypto world, there's two kinds of crypto. There's proof of work, like Bitcoin, where you have to expend a certain amount of energy in order to raise value. And the other is proof of stake, whereby you buy a certain amount of currency and you put some of it up as a stake to show confidence in that currency. Now, I think we can do that with carbon offset and carbon offset schemes. I don't know how you feel about that, Jeremy.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll let you take that one. Yeah, I think the difficulty is with proof of stake is getting that initial buy-in. I think if anybody's involved in the crypto world, will see so many crypto coins, tokens coming up and disappearing almost overnight. So the difficulty is with this thing. So what's happened in crypto generally is they've come from a proof of work basis and moved to proof of stake. So once they've got there, they've then moved over to proof of stake. So I think we've got to get there, and I think that's by engagement. I think what Nick says is absolutely right, that the two big accreditation bodies really aren't hacking it, and it's creating such a negative publicity around offsetting that we need to change that. So proof of stake definitely is a way to go with this. Yeah.
And Mark, I mean, I'd be interested to know whether you feel businesses are nervous about that word offsetting because of the kind of emotional link to, in simple terms, trees in the wrong place, and whether they yet are thinking about how the offsetting could be for social good or for things other than just trees.
I think the big gap is all about transparency. I think in a world where we're all craving for trust and transparency and there isn't any, businesses have got an opportunity to become transparent, and there's all sorts of benefits of doing that. I think one example I could probably give you would be the recycling industry. If you were to, I'm sure there's somebody here today who will know this figure, but if you ask them how much recycled waste was recycled last year in Wales, somebody will give you a figure and prove it. Where is the evidence of all those audit trails? And it's commonly known in the recycling industry is the Peaky Blinders of today. The modern day gangster industry is in that world. And so when you're looking at carbon trading, it's got a little bit of a dirty name. The compliance levels are not quite there. They're coming. But the whole thing is about transparency. And I think that's where technologies like Jeremy's will
So do you think then that if businesses could see that actually, the carbon that we saved is helping to do this practical thing, do you think that would actually really change the narrative, change the sort of dirty suspicion field?
I think it would. I think it could everybody a little bit of confidence in terms of what they're doing is got an outcome. I always say with everything that we do, what does success look like when you make an investment? Well, businesses need to know that. I think governments need to really look at it, because if we're going to hit net zero targets and we're going to get to that date at some point in the future, again, the public are going to ask, well, prove it. And where is the data? How have you got here?
Yeah.
And that's not in place at the moment. And there's all sorts of legislation and compliance issues on the horizon, but it's coming, and businesses need to look at it, because I think in Denmark now they've already started. I think your carbon is on your balance sheet. And they say maybe we're 12 months away from UK businesses having that same challenge.
And already in the UK, our big financial institutions are already having to account for that, aren't they? And that's expected to go through the supply chain. Do you think there's an awareness of that? That Unilever, for instance, will be looking at their yogurt pot makers, and seeing the embedded carbon in what they do and how it impacts them. Do you think in Wales because we produce so many things that go into something else, do you think people have got it, that they might lose a contract because of they can't produce the nice numbers in terms of carbon for the supplier?
The bigger companies are terrified, and the reason why they're terrified is legislation is changing, and we don't know yet. Each government in the next election have got different policies, but the big impact is going to be on, we talk about carbon trading. If you're a manufacturer in Wales and you're currently buying carbon offsets from Africa, how can you measure that? I think we're going to get to the point where you're going to be a Welsh company and you'll only be able to buy carbon credits perhaps in the UK, because you can measure the impact. Why would you buy a carbon credit?
But even in the UK, if you planted a tree, it could be eaten by rabbits, couldn't it? That's the sort of problem.
All sorts of technical, and these guys, are on top of that. But the challenge is transparency, and it's compliance, and it's legislation. Those three factors are going to change this.
Yeah, Jeremy, in terms of the companies that you've been working with, the fact that you're in Wales, in the UK, because I presume that you work with people beyond Wales as well. Is that an attractive quality? Is that what people like?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've worked with a couple of Japanese-based firms, and they really are based in Wales, in North Wales, and they love the fact that it's local. You kind of think the opposite. You think that they'd want to, they're global players. They'd want to work on the global stage. They want their carbon as near to their front door as possible. So that's great for us. But I think, to take on what Mark was saying, that if we're not careful, this just becomes another tax. People will see it. It's a bit like your NI on your pay slip. And how many people, when they pay their NI, think, well, that goes to the NHS. So what we've got to do with carbon offsets and carbon credits is we've got to relate it to the benefit that it does, in the same way NI should be funding the NHS, so we can kind of see the cost and the benefit from doing the two. And I think if we can get that cost and benefit both happening here in Wales, then that's got to be a good thing. So that the Welsh government achieves what it wants to do, which is net zero by 2030. But businesses essentially have an answer, have a solution for these things, because they, as Mark said, they are scared stiff. We have an acronym CROP, we call it, which is calculate, reduce, offset, and promote. So promote your good. When you've done it, promote it. There is value in that. It's sales value in that. But very few businesses have done the calculate. A lot of them have done the reduce, because of the way their bills have gone up over the last 2 years. If you haven't reduced your energy costs, then you're probably not in business anymore. We've got to go back to calculate, so that they can actually quantify what they need to do. And the offset shouldn't be a dirty word, because there is only so much you can do. You need to have a carbon reduction plan going forward, but year on year, there's only so much you can do. And some of the big companies are deliberately, strategically, not making all their carbon reductions in year one, because they'd have nothing to do in year 2 or year 3, year 4. That's the crazy world that we live in. So our option is, reduce and offset. reduce an offset until you get to a point where you know, by 2030, hopefully you're net zero.
Yeah, because Nick, this 2 days here is about trying to reach net zero and ways of getting there. It doesn't really help net zero if people continue to behave in the way that they have been, and then just, I'll be really dirty and I'll use loads and loads of stuff and I'll fly everywhere, but I'll offset it. That's not going to help anyone, is it?
No, and I think that's what's interesting there is that's where price comes into play eventually. Now, it hasn't yet because historically there's been a huge backlog of carbon inventory offsets waiting to happen in what's called the voluntary carbon market. That's all been used up now. It's gone. And so our perception is there's a growing demand sitting behind this dam waiting to be let out, but needing that assurance before it does. And then we get into other issues about price. Just to go back to the where the demand is coming from, I think it's really interesting that the demand is coming not really from government. There's a commitment for net zero 2030. It's quite easy to say, okay, we're all going to do this, we're all in it together, but then no support for actually achieving that. So then it comes through some public sector procurement at local authority level. We've just been working with Welsh Local Government Association to build carbon reduction plans into procurement, and then management of contracts for lowering carbon. Those things are going to come in now. That'll then get pushed down supply chains. And at the other end, I think companies are being pushed by their consumers and by their workforce. My business is, we're a B Corp. We've just changed our bank account because we're not satisfied with the carbon performance of our bankers. So we've gone to the co-op because they've got a better record. So I think that pressure's coming from all angles, but we don't have the overall leadership and coordination to make this happen in a way that is really going to drive us forward and be sustainable in the longer term. So there's a number of issues there about how this progresses. And then when we got into the value, the price of voluntary carbon is still 11, 12 pound a tonne, something like that. In the emissions trading scheme, it's 45, 50 pounds a tonne. And what we're talking about for what's traditionally called charismatic carbon or carbon for good is about 70, 80 pounds a tonne. So all that needs to be sorted out through the system as this progresses.
Okay, 2 quick things. What's a B Corp? For anyone that doesn't know.
A B Corporation, this is my pitch. So B Corporation is a business that has changed its articles to take out the paragraph that says our first duty is to enhance shareholder value. So our first duty is to enhance people and planet over shareholders. And that enables you to do things for good.
And secondly, what's the voluntary carbon market in simple terms for anyone that doesn't discuss that?
So we have the emissions trading scheme, which is the official carbon market. And then we have the voluntary carbon market, which is the kind of wild west of everything else, where people fight it out and try and come up with something that makes sense.
So why is the voluntary carbon market, why is the price of carbon so much cheaper there than on the European trading?
Trust.
Right.
Trust.
So trust is like one of the most valuable things at the moment.
Absolutely. The perceived value is much lower, and that's something we need to address, because the voluntary carbon market probably has, or could potentially have, shall I put it that way, could potentially have more real value in terms of achieving net zero than the ETS. So that's where we
European trading scheme.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. So that's where we really ought to be concentrating. But we need someone to take it on. And that's maybe Welsh Government could do that in Wales. And that would be a big step forward, we think.
Because that's what you were saying earlier, Mark, wasn't it? Is that the lack of trust, the suspicion. To be honest, we are a nation that's not celebrated for being the biggest risk takers in society. So trust is quite important, yeah?
It's essential in when you're talking about markets that are based on compliance. If trust isn't there, they can't trade. And I think that's the problem with the voluntary market, is the compliance levels are non-existent.
Yeah.
And I think there's evidence coming out now about buying voluntary carbon credits, and you're buying them abroad, and there's all sorts of horror stories. The big game changer, I think, for Wales, and I think Welsh businesses that can potentially trade these, is the supply and demand. So when we start to regionalise carbon credits, and it's a UK-based credit, not an international credit, the demand is going to go up, and so is the value. And that's a game changer. And I think then what you'll find is you'll have experimental markets. 3-4 years' time will start to arise. So, for example, all of the waste which is currently coming out of our houses into our local authorities, what's stopping the local authorities from claiming new credits, new carbon credits, and businesses buying those as offsets? There's talk about
That could reduce
schools.
the rates.
Massively. There's talk about schools potentially installing solar on their roofs using a futures carbon credit, and businesses being able to buy that now, and legislation changes, and that allows them to claim that back. So I think you're going to have a big change, but it comes back to transparency.
Yeah, it needs to be rapid though, doesn't it? Does anyone want to come in at this point? Any questions or examples, or want to join and tell us what your organisation's doing or anything? Or are you happy for me to carry on? I'll carry on, but I'll keep turning around to you. Stick your hand up if you've got a question. So why blockchain then? Well, because you both referred to blockchain. I know you're involved in blockchain as well, and we'll hear about that in a sec. But why does blockchain enable a different way of behaving that we wouldn't have if we didn't have blockchain? Because some people, I think, are still a bit uneasy about that word blockchain.
Yeah. As soon as people talk about blockchain, they talk about crypto, and everyone goes, "Oh, crypto's use the phrase again, a cowboy market." But what blockchain essentially does is provide a ledger which is auditable, which cannot be changed, is immutable, cannot be changed, and so that gives you the security that the carbon that you say you've got isn't being double counted, isn't being traded twice, and so everything is available publicly for people to see and to look at. And let's say that was our first solution, was, well, how can we manage carbon credits in such a way that it's transparent, that it's auditable and it's transparent. And blockchain is perfect for that, because it's not our blockchain, it's everybody's blockchain. And all we're doing is writing our data in such a way that everyone can see it, everyone can check through it and see that things haven't been double counted. We talked about when you buy from a third country, potentially that carbon is being counted more than once. With the blockchain, you can give it a unique ID. It goes in your wallet, so every customer, every client of ours has a unique blockchain wallet, and all their carbon tokens that they buy sit in there, so their customers can see it all the way down the supply chain. So that's the difference that blockchain makes.
And do you want to come in now, Mark?
Yeah, we got involved with blockchain.
It is there.
Is there?
No, it's run out of juice. Try this one.
We got involved with blockchain by default, I suppose. We came across some funds. We were looking at blockchain, and just to demystify blockchain, for me it's very simple. If you've got data and you want data to be visible and transparent to everybody, and it cannot be hacked, it cannot be changed, that's blockchain. That's it. It is that simple. We looked at it and we were talking to lots of blockchain developers, and we found they were very, very clever people, very clever people. I think there's a lot of people in that space on the spectrum, and so they can be quite challenging commercially to work with. On the flip side, you've got organizations that should be using blockchain. You've never heard of blockchain. And so matching the two together was something that we spotted. We invested in a blockchain company ourselves, and we're connecting offshore wind developers to farmers' unions. We're looking at hydrogen.
So in what way are you connecting them, and to achieve what?
So flow, offshore wind, for example, this quite labour intensive, quite industry intensive. They're going to need to buy carbon offsets. Welsh farms have got premium stock, which many believe is going to be worth 7 or 8 times more than it's currently valued at today, based on this regional compliance legislation that will arrive eventually. Matching those together now, talking about creating a transparent ledger, which is blockchain, is exciting for them, and there's funding out there to do it. So they're all collaborating, or they're starting to collaborate. And I think that's where we spotted the gap, is we work with all of these sectors, all of these industries. We understand. I'm a tech geek, so I get it. I'm quite passionate about it. And having conversations with different industries and bridging them together is quite exciting, I think, for us.
And Nick, brand comes into this a lot, doesn't it? Because ultimately, we know that some brands, let's say, for instance, Volvo, want to make the world know that they are, in their terms, cleaner than another car company, which of course I won't name. And so they want green steel and things like that. And it comes down to almost smaller companies as well. The brand, i.e. your impact on the planet, actually now can affect the value of your company, can't it? And the kind of, and your retention of young people, for instance.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we found that just by trying to be a good company, we got voted into the 100 best workplaces in the UK last year, and our retention has just gone through the roof. We've only lost one person in the last 2 years, and they came back after 6 months because they didn't like it outside. So I think, giving those messages is really important for companies. But also, the way that this all ties in then, by doing offsetting, using blockchain that has this verification, we can use it on both sides of the coin, if you like, because not just for offsets, but also for manufacturing processes, for embedded carbon. So we can start to kind of, at each stage of a manufacturing process, we can use blockchain to say, what's the embedded carbon in this cup? So that when that company, the manufacturer of this cup, needs to offset it, that's already there, immutable, in terms of this is what your carbon deficit is, this is your overdraft. And you've got to neutralize that now by buying some offsets or improving your processes. So then you've got two choices. You can go back up the supply chain and say, okay, you're the guys who put it in boxes. We want better boxes so that it reduces our carbon footprint. Or you go downstream and you start buying offsets, which, from our perspective, we see as a short-term measure to a perfect planet. But at the moment, we know that people can't do enough to become zero carbon by 2030. And we did some work with all the local authorities in Wales 2 years ago, looking at their net zero plans and their progress towards 2030. And at that time, they're saying, okay, we're on the path, this is what we're doing to hit 2030. We reviewed that this year, and now people are saying, what happens when we don't hit 2030? Are we going to be fined? Can we offset? And so I think, that tipping point is fast approaching. And if I'm honest, when it does happen, we're not ready for the scale at which it's going to hit us. And we had this conversation over a cup of coffee previously, and we're slightly nervous that we don't have the systems in place to prepare ourselves to be ready for when that point happens. And I think we need a bit of support on that, if I'm honest.
Who should be giving support?
Well, I'd quite like to engage with government a little more on it, to be honest, because we are supporting what they're doing in terms of 2030. And I think, again, there's a slightly passive relationship with the decarbonisation process at present.
Mark, you wanted to come in there, and I know, you talk to politicians a lot, don't you? Come on, how are they responding?
Try not to.
When you say blockchain, decarbonisation, offsetting, B Corp, those sort of words, do they kind of smile and beam?
No. That said, they've got people below them, senior civil servants who get it. And there's a lot of smart civil servants out there who do understand this space. But I think when you're looking at this technology, we've built on a BSV blockchain. I think you're Ethereum or...
A what? Like Ethereum?
There's different blockchain layers. And there's also the blockchain guys will disagree with me, but there's a technology ownership piece here as well. And what we really need to have, I think, if this marketplace is to become compliant and transparent, is a level playing field to a certain degree. And you're talking about an industry itself, blockchain, which is...
Is there such a thing as a level playing field, ever?
Well, there's an opportunity, I think, to create a social enterprise blockchain platform. And I think if you create that, then you've got a level playing field for everybody then to build on. And then you can build a business model, and you haven't got to worry about IP, because IP is really important.
Okay, any questions? Anyone want to share their view? Gentlemen here, can we have a mic over here? Anyone else then want to come in? Then over there, you're going to get very fit running between the two. So from there to there, please.
Hello, thank you. Firstly, just an observation. I think it is a very confusing space. I think we're in essence battling with Web 2 and Web 3 technologies and terminology. I've spent most of my life in Web 2, and I find trying to understand Web 3 So all the things you just said, Sarah. So if everyone else is scared, don't worry, you're not alone. All these terms, you're like, what? But it means almost the same thing in Web 2. So one hat I'd like to put on, farmers. They're sat on incredible assets, say 500 acres up in Brecon or Carmarthenshire. Where would they start if they wanted to turn this asset into something that could add value to society, but also commercial gains themselves?
Okay, where would farmers start if they had those acreage? Come on then.
Give me a call. That's
More
what it's
than
on.
that.
Okay, we're going to get more complicated than that. Well, look, the difficulty with the soil organic carbon is measuring the carbon. So if you kind of think there's this seesaw, on the one side you've got businesses who are struggling to measure their carbon, calculate their carbon usage, and then there's an offset. Well, on the other side of the seesaw are farmers. So they need to calculate their carbon. They need to increase rather than reduce their carbon. They need to increase their sequestration, and they need to offset. And somewhere in the middle, they'll meet, and that's what our job is as we see it. But for the first thing is to measure the soil organic carbon on the farm. Now, there's two ways of doing this: is put your wellies on, take a spade, go into a field, dig a hole, measure this stuff. It goes away to a lab, spends 2 weeks in a lab. They essentially burn it, for want of a better word, and that tells you roughly how much CO2 is in it. We've just completed a pilot project with a satellite machine learning project. And what this does is it uses sentinel to satellites, which are going over every 5 or 6 days, to look at the ground and to infer how much carbon is in the soil. The beauty of that is that, first of all, you're going to go in the field and dig a hole on a wet winter's day. The second is these are going over every once a week, so you can actually see in week intervals how your soil is improving. So as a way of showing farmers that what they're doing is a good thing, this is ideal. On the pilot that we did, we had an 87% correlation between actual lab soil samples and satellite. Now, 87% we think we can improve on, but take into account the fact that we're measuring every week. It doesn't matter if you take your soil sample in October. If you're doing it the old-fashioned way with the spade, you'd have to take it in October this year and take it in October next year to see if there's any additionality between the two. And as we all know, 1 October one year can be very different climatically to the October the following year, and that would have a huge impact on the soil organic carbon values. So what the farmers would see is this complete, up and down graph of their soil organic carbon. So what we want to do is to again use tech, use the satellite observations that are there. And the great thing is that once we get this machine learning model, we'd like to think up to 90%. We can go back 5 years. So we can actually build up a natural capital picture of Wales. We look at all the farms, and we can almost go to a farmer and knock on their door and say, would you like to sell some of your carbon? Because, back in 2018, your soil organic carbon value was 18.1. Today, it's 18.3. Do the maths, 0.2 times the number of hectares on the farm, times 9.8 tons per hectare. Suddenly, you've got an actual value of carbon that's additionality. So not just some carbon, but actual additional carbon that's been sequestered in that period. And if you think of the sort of GDP of Wales,
Or farmer incomes.
Or farmer incomes, particularly
alone,
farmer incomes.
Yeah.
There's a huge amount of value in the fields, and we need to get that. And Wales is quite unique. We've looked at this over the border, and as soon as once you get to the southwest of England and south of England, where the high intensity arable farming, it really doesn't work in the same way. But Welsh farming is fairly low impact anyway, particularly up in North Wales or where from, where the impact. So there's a lot you can do very easily, very quickly to increase that additionality and to pull value out of your soil. What we need to do is we need to improve our satellite modelling. We need this to be across Wales. We've got the mechanism. We've got the blockchain mechanism. We've also got the bit that allows you to buy and sell it. What we need is, I think Nick alluded to this, we need better validation, better verification, because we're not going to go for a Vera accreditation because it's rubbish. Okay, but where do we go? You know, how do we get there? By, you know, we've got the pilot study. We want to do more of this, and if we can improve that, then yeah, we can solve two problems for Welsh Government. We can get the farmers off their back, and we can help them achieve net zero by 2030, and I think that's a pretty good pitch.
And massive impact, you know, when you've got a farming community that feels very got at and potentially impoverished by change, that's a real game changer, isn't it? I know the time is whizzing ahead. We've got a question over here.
Hi. The current linear economy is based upon extraction of fossil fuels purely to increase GDP. And what you're talking about here is really accounting for the impact of that. How do you see blockchain, as an example, as a method of, or a way of quantifying the value of a circular economy?
How do you see blockchain as a way of benefiting or calculating the circular economy? You probably all want to get in on this, so can we have 3 quick responses? Because my clock, who's standing at the back, tells me we're almost out of time.
I think when you're talking about data and you're talking about the future and you're talking about trust, which is something we're all lacking at the moment, and on so many reasons, transparency is essential, and blockchain allows the data you're talking about in that circular economy to be visible to everybody, and everybody knows that it can't be hacked, it can't be changed. So you've got a really transparent ledger, a data set, if you like, of that process, and it's that simple for me, I think.
Nick?
Yeah, I think massive. Just by being able to keep control of materials as they go through different life stages, really, really important. And I know from your own example, Owen, about the way that steel's used in the construction sector. If you could keep tabs on that, you could recycle that potentially, and avoid a lot of Scope 3 emissions or accreditation Scope 3 emissions. So really, really valuable. I certainly take what Mark said about the waste sector. It's not the easiest sector to work in, but there's a lot of elements within that could be really, really improved by better traceability. And I think blockchain could deliver that, even right down to kind of curbside deposit return schemes. You know, we need to keep tabs on materials as they go through the system, and blockchain can really help there.
Jeremy, you've got the last word.
Oh, the last word. Okay. Well, I think I think the simple answer to that question is that we talked about the seesaw and the positive carbon on one side, negative carbon on the other side. Blockchain is the plank. So Welsh Government have provided the fulcrum, they've provided the tip. They've said we need to get up to here, and we've got this seesaw now, and blockchain provides the plank. It ties the people who've got positive carbon to the people who've got negative carbon, and it does it in a very solid and robust way. And believe me, I've been on enough seesaws to realise that if you're going to have a plank, it needs to be a very strong and reliable one. So that's.
But it's fun.
But it's fun. And it can be. Yeah.
And the rest of us have all got to get over our scare of the word blockchain.
Yes.
And I don't know how you do that.
I think that's just going to come. I think I was involved in an IoT project 8-9 years ago, and when you start talking about Internet of Things, everyone went, the Internet of Things. And now we've got Alexas in our home, and blockchain will be the next thing, and the next after that will probably be AI, which we're all using now. So, and it goes back to my point earlier that let's not fear tech. Let's use it. Let's use it for good. If we can't do that in this forum, where can we?
What a brilliant phrase to end on. Thank you ever so much. Thank you to our panelists. Thank you to you. And a little break, and then there'll be another session on this stage. We're here for 2 days. There's a lot to talk about. Thank you, everyone, and thank you.
Thank you.